Blue emergency lights flashed silently across the hull of a massive private yacht docked at Pier 14, painting the surrounding concrete in rhythmic pulses of sapphire and cobalt. Dozens of unmarked black SUVs had completely sealed off the perimeter, their engines idling in low, threatening hums. Uniformed officers from Special Branch, flanked by heavily armed agents from the National Crime Agency, moved with absolute tactical precision, surrounding a sleek matte black Range Rover idling near the vessel's stern loading ramp. Inside that vehicle sat two figures whose faces were recognized across every corner of the globe: Queen Camilla and her son, Tom Parker Bowles. Within seconds, the driver's side window was violently tapped by the barrel of an officer's sidearm, demanding immediate compliance. The door was pulled open, and the royal mother and son were ordered out of the vehicle under the harsh glare of tactical flashlights. There were no cameras, no red carpets, and no bowing courtly aides. Instead, the sharp snap of steel handcuffs resonated through the cold ocean breeze as wrists were secured behind backs. The charges being read were not for minor infractions, nor could they be swept away by royal privilege. They involved treason, high-level financial racketeering, and the unauthorized handling of sensitive state secrets. As Camilla was escorted toward a transport van, her eyes wide with shock and sheer disbelief, team leaders focused their attention on the heavy vehicle they had just intercepted. A specialist locked onto the trunk of the Range Rover, utilizing heavy-duty cutting gear to breach a customized, biometric locking mechanism installed underneath the rear floorboards. When the steel lid finally popped open with a heavy metallic hiss, the agents backed away to let the forensic team step forward. Lined along the bottom of the trunk rested three heavy military-grade metal cases, each stamped with red wax seals bearing the classified insignia of the Cabinet Office and the personal cipher of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Inside those cases lay thick, leather-bound binders stuffed with yellowed dossiers, original handwritten correspondence, encrypted digital drives, and signed codicils that had been officially listed as destroyed decades ago. These were the long-rumored black box files, a collection of absolute explosive evidence capable of dismantling the entire power structure of the British monarchy in a single afternoon. Word of the maritime raid hit the inner sanctum of Windsor Castle like a seismic detonation. King Charles III was seated in his private library, reviewing state papers, when the Chief of the Royal Protection Command burst through the double doors without knocking, an unprecedented breach of royal protocol that immediately sent a surge of adrenaline through the monarch. The king's hands trembled as he was handed an encrypted tablet displaying live tactical feeds from Portsmouth Harbour. Watching his wife of nearly 2 decades being searched against the side of an armoured transport car, Charles reportedly sank into his leather armchair, completely speechless, his face draining of all colour. The man who had spent his entire life preparing to wear the crown suddenly found the ground beneath his throne collapsing into an abyss of deception. For years, rumours had quietly circulated through the dark corridors of Whitehall about a secret financial apparatus operating parallel to the royal purse. However, non-disclosure agreements, royal warrants, and centuries of institutional opacity had kept the truth firmly buried beneath the floorboards of the realm. What the raid at Portsmouth revealed was that this shadow operation was not merely a passive secret. It was an active, decades-long scheme engineered to divert vast sums of crown assets into offshore trusts, obscure overseas shell companies, and private real estate holdings across Europe. At the center of this elaborate financial maze was Tom Parker Bowles, leveraging high-level access, culinary media fronts, and private international networks to move untraceable paper trails far beyond the reach of parliamentary oversight. Yet the financial crimes were only the surface layer of the crisis. The sealed files retrieved from the trunk contained documents so sensitive that their disclosure threatened to rewrite modern royal history entirely. Among the initial pages logged by forensic technicians were private letters dating back to the late 1980s and early 1990s, detailed logs documenting covert intelligence operations, private surveillance notes on high-ranking government officials, and internal royal communications regarding the late Princess Diana that had been deliberately withheld from official inquests. Camilla had not simply kept these files as a personal insurance policy. Evidence indicated that an active effort was underway to smuggle them out of the United Kingdom via the private vessel waiting at Portsmouth Harbour, bound for a non-extradition jurisdiction in international waters. As news of the dockside arrests began to leak to top-tier security chiefs and senior cabinet ministers, panic gripped the highest halls of power in London. Emergency calls rang out between Downing Street, the Home Office, and Scotland Yard as officials scrambled to contain an unprecedented constitutional emergency. How could the Queen Consort and her civilian son be formally processed through the criminal justice system without triggering the immediate collapse of the government? Standard legal protections afforded to the sovereign did not cleanly extend to the Queen Consort in matters involving national security breaches, leaving the legal team at Buckingham Palace completely paralyzed. Outside the high perimeter walls of Portsmouth Harbour, the quiet night was slowly broken by the distant wail of incoming police escorts, clearing the path for high-security transport vehicles. Camilla sat in silence in the back of the lead armoured car, staring out at the rain starting to streak across the reinforced glass, her royal influence rendered entirely useless by the cold reality of the steel wrist restraints. Her son sat in a separate transport vehicle just meters behind, surrounded by armed guards who refused to answer a single question. The illusion of impenetrable royal untouchability had been shattered in a matter of minutes, setting off a chain reaction that was about to rock the British public to its core. By midnight, the high-security transport convoy rolled past the formidable steel gates of a restricted counter-terrorism facility on the outskirts of London. Deep beneath the surface level, in a sterile interrogation suite monitored by the highest echelon of intelligence officials, Queen Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles were separated and seated across from veteran investigators. The warmth of royal privilege had evaporated entirely. In its place hung the stark, oppressive reality of a national security interrogation. Across the table, lead investigators meticulously laid out high-resolution photographs of the contents retrieved from the Range Rover's trunk, displaying documents bearing official state seals alongside private, unredacted transcripts that detailed decades of clandestine arrangements. Among the most harrowing revelations contained within the open binders was evidence detailing a sophisticated network of influence peddling and extortion. For over 20 years, shadow entities linked to the Parker Bowles private accounts had systematically gathered sensitive intelligence on political figures, foreign diplomats, and key members of the establishment. The files revealed that these dossiers were not stored merely for record-keeping. They were strategic collateral, utilized to ensure absolute discretion and guarantee that specific legislative decisions regarding royal taxation, land rights, and public auditing remained permanently in favor of the Crown's private inner circle. As investigators turned the pages, the full scale of the operation began to emerge. Tom Parker Bowles had operated as the primary custodian of this off-the-books network, using international publishing ventures, international culinary tour, and high society charitable foundations as cover to move substantial, non-audited capital across borders. Bank statements pulled directly from the waterproof metal cases highlighted massive wire transfers originating from obscure Caribbean banking hubs and ending in high-yield, discreet European investment firms. Each transaction was meticulously linked to codenames that corresponded directly with high-profile royal property transactions, private artwork sales, and undisclosed corporate acquisitions across North America. Back at Windsor Castle, King Charles remained isolated in his private quarters, refusing all calls from senior courtiers and government liaison officers. The monarch paced the length of the grand room, surrounded by centuries of royal portraits that seemed to watch on in quiet judgment. The revelation that his wife of decades, the woman for whom he had navigated decades of media firestorms, public backlash, and institutional friction, had maintained a private vault of leverage against the state, was a personal betrayal that cut far deeper than any political scandal. When senior legal advisors finally gained entry to the room, they delivered a brutal legal reality. The Crown could not legally intervene to suppress the ongoing criminal investigation without precipitating an immediate constitutional crisis that would inevitably force an abdication. Downing Street was plunged into frantic, round-the-clock emergency sessions. The Prime Minister, summoned to an emergency midnight briefing with the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Home Secretary, stared at confidential briefings confirming the authenticity of the seized files. The government faced an impossible dilemma. Attempting to cover up an arrest executed by Special Branch and the National Crime Agency would result in massive, uncontrollable leaks from within the security apparatus itself. Yet allowing a sitting Queen Consort to be formally indicted on charges involving treason and financial corruption threatened to destabilize the very foundation of the British state, calling into question the legitimacy of decades of royal governance. Simultaneously, within the subterranean detention facility, investigators began probing the second major binder recovered from the trunk, a file stamped with the classification mark ultra-restricted, Royal ARCHIVS Special Collection. Within this binder lay original, unredacted reports regarding the events surrounding August 1997. The documents contained private notes, internal security logs, and taped conversation transcripts that had been deliberately omitted from the official Royal Courts of Justice inquest into the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The evidence pointed to an extensive, unauthorized surveillance operation conducted by independent security contractors loyal to the private estate of the former Prince of Wales and Camilla during the critical months leading up to the Paris tragedy. The implication was staggering. Camilla had quietly secured and retained these sensitive historical records, keeping them entirely secret from Charles and the public as the ultimate personal guarantee. If her position within the royal house was ever threatened, or if institutional forces ever sought to push her out, the existence of these files ensured she possessed absolute, destructive leverage over the entire monarchy. The boat waiting at Pier 14 in Portsmouth had not been booked for a routine getaway. It was an emergency extraction plan, activated the moment internal informants warned her that federal forensic accountants had finally cracked the digital signatures of her offshore network. During her interrogation, Camilla maintained a cold, calculating silence, refusing to answer questions without the presence of her personal legal counsel. However, her son's resolve began to crack under the overwhelming weight of the physical evidence presented before him. Confronted with bank records, decrypted text transmissions, and recorded wiretaps detailing his direct involvement in moving state-adjacent funds, Parker Bowles began to reveal the mechanics of the operation. He detailed how the shadow funds were funneled into private trusts designed to secure massive personal wealth outside the jurisdiction of parliamentary scrutiny, ensuring that his branch of the family would remain immensely wealthy and protected regardless of the monarchy's long-term future. As dawn approached over London, the first whispers of the night's events began to break through international media channels. Groundbreaking reports from non-traditional foreign press began citing unusual military and tactical police activity around Portsmouth Harbour and the unusual lockdown of major transport routes into the capital. The Royal Press Office was flooded with thousands of urgent inquiries from news outlets across the globe, forcing Buckingham Palace to issue a brief, cryptic statement confirming that an ongoing security matter involving senior members of the household is currently under investigation by the relevant authorities. The statement sent shockwaves through the global media landscape. News anchors rushed on air, legal experts began debating the unprecedented statutory parameters, and crowds began gathering outside the gates of Buckingham Palace and Windsor. The veil of modern royal majesty had been abruptly torn away, exposing a high-stakes struggle for survival, power, and accountability that threatened to forever alter the trajectory of the British monarchy. As the early morning light filtered through the thick stained glass windows of Windsor Castle, the atmosphere inside the royal residence was heavy with an overwhelming sense of collapse. King Charles stood at the window of his private study, looking out over the misty grounds. He was no longer just a mourning husband or a shocked monarch. He was a sovereign forced to choose between the preservation of an 800-year-old institution and the personal loyalty he had carried for half a lifetime. His private secretaries bustled in and out of the room, carrying red leather dispatch boxes filled with emergency memorandums from the Privy Council, Parliament, and foreign heads of state. The political establishment was demanding blood, transparency, and immediate action. Downing Street called for an emergency session of Parliament to address the constitutional vacuum. The Prime Minister made it clear in a private, encrypted phone call to the King that the government could not, and would not, participate in a cover-up. The sheer volume of evidence seized at Portsmouth had already been logged into federal intelligence databases, meaning any attempt to suppress the findings would lead to catastrophic leaks from within law enforcement itself. The Crown's absolute immunity was about to meet its ultimate boundary, the unforgiving wall of modern legal accountability and public fury. Inside the subterranean counter-terrorism facility, the tone of the interrogation had shifted from tactical questioning to high-stakes legal negotiation. Tom Parker Bowles, visibly shaken and realizing the legal net had tightened completely around him, offered a full narrative breakdown of how the shadow financial system operated. He detailed how offshore corporate structures in Liechtenstein, Panama, and the Channel Islands were used to conceal billions in untaxed assets, art collections, and prime international real estate. The money had been funneled through complex private equity funds under the guise of charitable investments and cultural preservation projects, effectively bypassing both royal auditors and the Inland Revenue. Camilla, sitting in an adjacent interview room, listened as senior prosecutors laid out the full scope of her son's confessions. The stony silence she had maintained for hours finally began to fracture. When presented with the original, unredacted intelligence folders regarding Princess Diana, her composure dissolved into visible desperation. The documents revealed that the covert surveillance apparatus had not merely observed events. It had carefully tracked financial transactions, private meetings, and personal communications of high-profile figures who sought to challenge the established royal order during the 1990s. Keeping those files locked away in the custom floorboards of her vehicle had been her ultimate insurance policy against institutional exile, a weaponized secret designed to guarantee her position at the center of the firm forever. By noon, the news had broke fully into the global mainstream. Headlines across television networks, online portals, and print outlets blared the unbelievable truth. Queen Camilla and her civilian son were officially in federal custody following a midnight tactical raid at Portsmouth Harbour. Massive crowds converged outside Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Parliament Square. Public reaction swung wildly from utter disbelief to mounting outrage. Demonstrators demanded the immediate release of the sealed documents, while legal experts went on live television to debate the legal precedents of trying a sitting queen consort for high treason and financial racketeering. Inside Buckingham Palace, Prince William arrived via private helicopter for an emergency summit with his father. The atmosphere between the king and the heir to the throne was tense, filled with the unsaid weight of years of silent friction. William insisted on absolute transparency, arguing that any effort to shield Camilla or her son would permanently destroy the public's trust in the monarchy and ruin the institution he was destined to inherit. The prince urged his father to stripping all royal titles, revoke warrants, and let the justice system take its full, unhindered course, regardless of how painful the fallout might be for the family. Faced with an unprecedented legal mandate, King Charles signed a royal decree waiving executive immunity regarding the contents of the seized metal cases, officially authorizing the Director of Public Prosecutions to proceed with formal charges.